Learn best by doing. So every product we engineer, every activity we write, every curriculum we develop, and every solution we design is provided for the purpose of helping students use their hands to engage their minds to grow, learn, and succeed in the classroom and in life. You can learn more about Pitsco education at pitsco.com. Prior to kicking things off, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. We would like for the webinar to be as interactive as possible, and we encourage all of our participants to submit questions to Erin throughout the event. To submit a question, simply type it in the chat box, which is located in the lower corner of the GoToWebinar control panel. Lastly, we want to remind our attendees that the materials shown today, along with a recording of the webinar, will be made available for on-demand reading and viewing. And now for our main event. Today we are fortunate enough to have Aaron Maurer with us to share his experience of becoming a STEM champion for his district. Aaron has been in education for more than a decade, teaching a variety of subjects and grade levels. Currently, he is an instructional coach for Bettendorf Middle School in Bettendorf, Iowa, and mentors 3 robotics teams. Aaron recently launched an engineering program called Young Engineers of Today and is a member of the Microsoft Innovator Educator Expert Program. He was a finalist for the Iowa Teacher of the Year in 2014. I would like to welcome Aaron and thank you for being with us this evening.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. Really excited. I apologize for that minute glitch to all the audience people. My son restarted my computer literally about 10 minutes before I was supposed to jump on. But, you know, those are the curveballs that education gives us. We can have the best lesson plan, and on a moment's notice, we have to be able to adapt. So as I go through this, I'm going to go through a lot of information here tonight. Feel free to throw stuff in the chat. We've made sure we set aside time in the end to answer the questions and things that you have. So feel free to throw those in there, and we'll cover them at the end. The other thing that I want to share quickly here is on this website, coffeeforthebrain.com/STEM champion, and maybe we'll make sure we get that in the chat loaded up as well. Is a link to a ton of resources, projects, ideas, starter kits, all sorts of stuff for you to get started with a lot of ideas I'm going to be sharing here tonight. So we've already kind of talked about who I am. I'm just a bald, ugly guy from Iowa, just trying to do the best that I can, help kids get excited about STEM and making and really just hands-on learning, getting them excited when they come to school and learn and figure out who they are and kind of who they want to be. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. This quote here really kind of captures everything that I think is important about being an educator, and in particular being one that's involved in STEM and making, and we express who we are through what we make. And I think that that's so important. And when I read this quote, it reminded me of myself as a kid. So there's my beautiful face mug as a 7th grader. And I started to think about what is it that I've kept from all my years of schooling that I still have with me today. And as I started to kind of pack through stuff, I realized I don't have a whole lot. I've got this broken piece here from kindergarten where I made something with clay and a dolly. I have this book that I wrote when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade about a fox that had a problem with girls. I went on and I had a class. This is an old Apple IIe, if you remember back in the day, and I vividly remember the code that I wrote for a computer game. It was a terrible game. It wasn't very good, but it was the elective that I fell in love with. I also then made this piece in high school of my gap. I have a beautiful gap between my 2 front teeth. This ceramic piece. And if you look, my artwork from kindergarten to high school my skills didn't improve much. But this is it. This is the 4 pieces, the only artifacts I have of all my years of schooling. And the reason I'm still around is because I made them, and at some point they were really important to me. I was proud of what I was able to accomplish. And here I am now trying to keep moving forward with stuff. Here's with the latest Microsoft HoloLens. I'm working with students to develop games. And this is what I think is so important, that it's not about the tools. And so many times when we talk STEM and makerspace and engineering, people want to know is, what do I have to buy? Where do I get money? And it's not about the tools. It's about the culture that we create. Because you see, technology is going to change and adapt. And I know that you know this, but this used to be an innovative technology. So was the original iPod. And at one point, when we were clearing out of science storage, these images and the old cassette tapes was considered revolutionary. We've had things like Google Glass, which I was fortunate enough to have at one point, and sometimes the latest technologies can be the biggest flop. So we can't get so caught up in the tools. What we need to do is learn how to build the experience and the culture, and that's really the championship mindset that I want to make sure we get across, that we're going through here building experiences of hands-on learning where kids are figuring out how to create problems and how to come up with solutions. And so the 7 key questions that I want you to kind of think about as we work through here a little bit. The first is, what are makerspaces? And I know this is about being a STEM champion, but I think makerspaces, there's so many different words and acronyms that kind of just blend together. And a makerspace, you can call it whatever. These spaces need to be more and more and more in schools where people and kids can tinker and create and share and invent. You can insert any descriptive word you want. Really what this is we want kids learning. And so this is the Coffee Truck Cafe. This is where a lot of the STEM and makerspace stuff happens in my school. But this should be an image that we could replace with every single classroom. You don't need high-end equipment to make this happen. But are we creating the culture which allows this to develop? That's where we have to be. And so when we talk about STEM, I pulled this from the dictionary, and I know this is not the science, technology, engineering one, but if you look through all the definitions of STEM, we see the main, the root, it's the essence of all these definitions, and I think that's what STEM is about. It's the essence of learning. It's the essence of life. And I know that there's all sorts of different kind of acronyms out there, STEAM, and people trying to incorporate all these different things. And the minute we try to incorporate everything, it becomes nothing. And so one of the things that I think to be a STEM champion is we have to push beyond the problems in school. And so many schools are so structured, they're so programmed, and then we sit around and complain that kids can't think for themselves. And then I always like to pose the question, but are we creating an environment that allows them to think for themselves? Or have we created an environment where they have to sit and wait for instructions? So the problem so many times in education is that we haven't defined the problem we're trying to solve. And so STEM is just one of many acronyms. And if we don't build this base, this foundation, we're going to have a mess on our hands. And so this is obviously a 3D print gone completely wrong. And what I want to highlight here is not to focus on the negative, but if we don't focus on the culture first, the tools are worthless. The tools don't mean anything. It's kind of like the treadmill that sits in the basement and collects dust and holds people's clothes and laundry, because you have a tool, but you haven't built the habits to base the foundation to be able to utilize the tool properly. And so I always like to think, what do we mean by the learning? And I think there's a fundamental difference between being a student and a learner. And that's what we have to get at. And to answer this question, what we mean by learning, this is where STEM and making and all these things start to come into place. We have to start to do the work. This is my daughter at the age of 4. This is their generation. The documenting, watching YouTube videos where kids talk about everything they do. They want to showcase their learning. It's who they are. So what are we doing as educators to help make that happen? We need to avoid this, a recipe where at the end, everybody models the birdhouse that the teacher has demonstrated. We don't want a recipe. We want projects. We want open-ended, high-level, deep-thinking activities that push kids to the brink. That's what we're after. And so how are they related? All these words, for the sake of this webinar, blend together. Whether I'm talking STEM or hackerspace or STEAM, it doesn't matter. They're all in it together. And so I love this quote here, that the scandal of education, that every time you teach something, you deprive a child of pleasure and the benefit of discovery. And I think there's so much truth to that. So many times we're so pressured as educators to get through more. that we don't allow time for kids to find the answers on their own. And that's where the real learning is. And so we need to be asking ourselves, not how do we do school better, but different. Because I have yet to see a teacher that hasn't put in countless hours, maybe not always the most productive, but working so hard to try to help kids. And so it's not better. This can't be one more thing on the plates of educators, because educators are already on the brink of burning out. But how can we do what we're doing now differently to be more effective of our time and to get to the core of why we got an education, which is to help students learn? And so this is what we're after. How do we move this? How do we learn how to make things, to find problems and to find solutions? And so my parent perspective is I have a daughter, and every day she writes in her planner all the things that she's learned. And I have a son that last year wrote this. He's learned nothing. And it reminds me of myself as a kid. I spent so many times just memorizing, cramming information to pass a test, and 2 days later forgetting. That's not education. I was able to jump through the hoops, but that's not the world in which we live in. You no longer, there's hoops you have to jump through, but if we can showcase our skills and abilities, people are going to take us on. And so it's not about the tools, it's about enabling the making. And what you're looking at here is I have a group of kids that like to come in early in the morning and do work in my makerspace, and we have a great relationship. And they're getting frustrated that I wasn't getting there early enough. So they built this device completely on their own that actually do like a matrix, the movie of all the numbers that trickle down. They know the numbers and they change it like every week, and they put in the code and it actually unlocks my door from the inside so they can get in early because they want to learn, they want to make, they want to do, and they solve their own problem. And I just find that to be brilliant. So who is a maker? We often think of this type of guy, a scientist or a MacGyver, but really we're all makers. So this is my family. It's always good to have that family plug in there. And you know, I always tell my wife, she's a maker. She takes things and she makes things around the house. That's making. It doesn't always have to be robotics and engineering and coding. So you listening, or that person that's not listening that maybe needs to be listening, is a maker. And we need to embrace that, embrace all the different ways in which making and STEM can look. And so where do we put these places? So as we talk about this, a lot of you are going, yeah, I get it. I know this stuff already. And one of the questions that pops up time and time again is, where do we put them? You put them wherever you have room. We've got mobile labs. We've got things in closets. We've got things just crammed in the classroom. You can put them in the media center, on a cart. You can do mystery bags. Wherever you can find room, there's a way to make it happen. You know, most importantly is to put it right there in your classroom and just make it part of what you do every single day. And then when do we begin? I challenge you to begin now, because we always wait for this perfect time, and there's never a perfect time. It's to start to build a culture as soon as we possibly can. And so then the next question is, well, how do I create this culture? You start with what you have, and I know that seems like such a simple answer. You don't need a ton of stuff. When we started with cardboard and duct tape and just scraps, and we built it, and the kids get excited, and they go home and talk to their parents about it, and then all of a sudden we're asking for donations, and now we've got hundreds of pounds of Legos, and then we go, okay, we need more, and we start building itself. The culture grows and cultivates itself. So you don't need to start out with everything. You can start with very little. And that's the first problem for kids to solve. How can we make this happen with what we have? So the other key question of these 7 is why? Why should I create this culture of learning? And I love this. I read this on Twitter a couple weeks ago. If education were a business, would it suffer the same fate as Blockbuster, Sears, Kodak, and Borders? The idea is, what are we doing to help make sure that the schools are the most positive and nurturing, thought-provoking learning atmosphere that we can provide? Are we doing enough to make sure that school is bending enough to meet the kids' needs, or bending the needs of teachers? And so the elements are these. This is what I always focus on, are these characteristics right here. We want to be curious. What if? What if we do this? What happens if we do that? I don't know. Let's try it and let's find out. That's the greatest response that any teacher can give a kid. That's the heart of the champion. I don't know, but let's do this together. Be playful. Okay, so now we have an answer. But now, what if we add light? So this is a toothbrush robot, a brush bot. You've probably seen, we make them all the time. Kids like, what if we add LED lights? I don't know. Go for it. What if we add a sensor? I don't know. Go for it. and for the sake of time, we'll skip this. And then we started to move in beyond with LEDs and circuitry. We carved a pumpkin, and this is ran by an Arduino, and it opens and closes its mouth. And then we started adding ultrasonic sensors. And the funny thing is with this project, the hardest part of this entire project right here was not the coding and the wiring and the electrical work. For the kids, it was carving. I couldn't believe how many kids had never carved a pumpkin, and they did not know how to use a knife. They did not know how to carve. And then it said, okay, we want to do more. So we started building copper trees. And so the idea is to build this idea of being a risk taker, modeling the way. So much of what I used to do early on was I would do all the work at home and then bring this end product to kids. And that's intimidating because they're always like, well, I can't do that. So finally now I do all my experimenting in my classroom before and after school so they can see that I struggle along with it and be able to push the boundaries. And understanding our perspective of how we utilize things. I always tell people a cardboard box can go a million different directions. It's just a matter of how we see it, how we use it, how we operate the spaces and the materials that we have, and staying persistent. This is just a life skill. It just takes a lot of practice to acquire. This girl right here was so phenomenal. She could not figure out soldering for the life of her, and she worked and worked and worked. And I don't know if you've ever had that moment where a kid gets it, the light bulb goes off, and it's kind of like a glow to their skin. There's just no better moment as an educator. And when she finally got the soldering figured out, I couldn't be more proud. But that moment wouldn't have had it happen had I not given her the time and the space to be persistent and to continue to try through mistakes. And the biggest thing here is to share as well. We have to share not just the final end beautiful piece, but the journey along the way. What works, what doesn't work, where are we at? And so we were recently sharing what it means to be a scientist with some first graders in Texas via Skype. And when we did that, we were sharing about our robot Twitch, as you can see here in the image. And we were going through all this stuff, and the kids were excited. He was moving back and forth with our PlayStation controller and making noise and talking. And then we got posed this question of, how did dinosaurs become robots after they died? And this kid was dead serious, and we were not sure how to answer this question. So we simply said, I don't know, but we're going to look into it. And so now our students are now taking that question, and they're trying to build a robotic dinosaur to give an answer to the kid. And so inspiration comes in weird ways. What I always tell people when you're looking at trying to be a STEM champion is you make with your mind and you form the idea with your hands. So it all starts between the ears, and your hands just simply allow it to come to life. And so we have a phrase in our makerspace that we don't wait for inspiration, we chase it down with circuits and coffee. Because learning, the essence is that it's all about stuff that sticks. We want to create places where kids don't forget all the things that they've learned. And so there's got to be this emotional appeal. And we can take really simple things of cheap LED lights and watch batteries and cardboard and duct tape and do some amazing things. The idea here that 6 2x4 Lego pieces can be assembled in 915 million different combinations. So what do you have at your disposal right now that could be used to allow kids to voice answers in a variety of different directions? And this is what we're after. We want kids to feel the feeling of innovation. And the way we do that is we have to do that ourselves as educators. We can't just talk about it. We've got to be about it. And this is where things often get misguided. We talk about sharing and seeing things on the internet, but the learning journey is more important than the final product. We can have a final product that fails. We can have a final product that is ugly. We can have a final product that isn't where we wanted to end up, but the journey was profound. And so we need to make sure the emphasis is on the journey, not the end piece. And the minute you start to focus on the end piece, your culture is going to change, and it's not for the better. So let's think about the following here. What is the experience that you're trying to create? That's for you to figure out. Every space, every STEM place I go to has a different vibe. There's common themes, there's common elements, but you need to ask yourself in your school, where you're at, your classroom, what is it that you're trying to create? What are the learning goals and the outcome you want to achieve in this space? You have to have a plan. For me, it's for kids to push the learning in ways in which nobody else is doing. And we want to be able to document that. Who's going to lead the students? If it's going to be you, realize that making this happen is going to be more time out of your day. Is it a team? Are you alone? You need to figure out who's in charge because a lot goes into this. Are you going to provide students set curriculum or more open-ended projects? Ideally, it's open-ended, but every school, every state is different, and that can't always be the case. So even within a set curriculum, how can you build open-ended opportunities? What grade levels are you going to target in your space or in your classroom? That might be an obvious question, like why is that there? Because that directly impacts the amount of support, the materials, and things that you need. What I'm going to bring and infuse and expect with 8th graders is going to be different than 4th graders. How are students going to access the space? When is it available? Before or after school? During lunch? Do they have study hall? How are they going to get in there wherever your STEM place is going to be in order to let their learning come to life? And how are educators going to learn? How are you going to bring more on board? Because I always tell people, in terms of makerspaces, if a makerspace is so popular, which they're everywhere now, it's a buzzword that's all over, why do we have a space in school to not feel like school? That's a problem. And so this culture can be everywhere, and it should be everywhere. And so the way we do that, we have to bring educators in. We have to empower them. We have to educate them. We have to help them understand the culture and feel the culture and be about the culture. And as much as we don't like to look at this, but there's a lot of schools, at the end of the day, you still got to prove that kids are learning. How are you going to assess this? And how do you do it in a way that stays open-ended and true to the passions of the kids? Once you have those woven in, you can start talking tools. You can start figuring out what you need to bring in to bring those ideas to life. And oftentimes, people like to focus on the tools first and then say that'll change the culture, and that's not true. You've been in education long enough to know that's not the way it goes. So you have to build the foundation first. And what you're looking at is just a variety of kind of different projects. We laser cut our pumpkins this year, electric conductive ink, and resin soldering, and all sorts of crazy things. From here, where we're trying to get to now is to help kids be STEM champions themselves. And so what we're trying to do in our school, and we're far from perfect, but the kids that come in my makerspace, the expectation is that they share online, they build a resume. Because if they can document what they've been doing as a 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grader and continue to build that out and learn how to share and learn how to document the trials and tribulations, by the time they're a senior, this portfolio is so vast, it's so great, they're going to be so far ahead of people. So here's a group of 8th graders we're working on. We're trying to devise a GPS tracking device for cows for a very poor village in India for a farmer. And we're struggling with our device, and so we were on call. We reached out to the founder of Dexter Industries, and they came in early one morning to help figure out why their code wasn't working. What a great opportunity for them. Same thing here. Here's a gentleman from India. Actually, he's at Stanford, but it's his family that is in India, and we're bouncing ideas over to understand the culture. And so there's so many hidden benefits to being a STEM champion, and building these places allow it to happen. These guys are learning so much more than just simply how to write a code or how to solder. They're learning people, they're learning culture, how to communicate, how to sell their ideas, how to work through the 10,000 things in which just simply don't work. Here's our basic design of our robot that we started building a couple of years ago. And now it's evolved to this. And I need a more updated picture, actually. We've now put in an LED screen and 3D printed different parts. And we're trying to get this robot to deliver coffee to teachers in our building. And they've been lucky enough because they've been sharing and documenting and working. They've been in magazines. They were just in the Robot magazine. They've been in several publications because of their work. Not because they're special, but how many kids are actually demonstrating the whole entire process. And so I want you to think about this, that everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. And so that's where we've got to get to. That's what we've got to start to think about in this message, is how, as we as educators, how do we help students this way? Not focus on everyone else, but focus on ourselves. Because our students' dreams are bigger than the standards we have to cover. That's where we are. It's a happy medium. I know it's not perfect, but we have to figure out how to still do our job with standards and the assessments and all the things that we're required to do as teachers, but still allow students' dreams to come to life. And for some kids, they don't even have dreams. We have to help them find their dreams. That's where we've got to be. That's part of being a STEM champion. And so what's next? Like, what does this all mean? Like, where are we going to go with this? My challenge to you here is this, and I know we'll get into the questions, and hopefully there's some in there that we can get to, is I want you to paint your masterpiece. What I mean by that is I want you to get going and paint this picture. We don't have to know the entire process to get there, but what is that masterpiece you envision for your classroom or for your school, depending on your job? But we have to know where we want to go. This is the goal of makerspace. This is the goal of being a STEM champion. What is it that you want to create? What is this space? What's your goal? And, paint a picture. Be a Bob Ross. Paint a picture. Or sketch it on a notepad. Or draw something on your device. And then do the same thing for kids. What is their masterpiece? What is it that they want to do? Give them some canvas and have them create their picture. But model it yourself. And when we do that, when we allow that to happen, when your behaviors begin to change, students' behaviors begin to change. I always challenge educators with this, that our behaviors in our personal lives have changed. So many of us are on our phones and on Facebook and texting and doing all these things we never would have thought we would have done 5 years ago. But yet when we walk into the classroom, we still process from an old world perspective where all this stuff is bad. And we don't want to share our mistakes and flaws. That's where we have to be. That's where we want to go. That's what we're trying to get to. And so we can't act like our students. What we need to do is push forward, where students have to wait for a bell. They have to wait for an adult to stand in front of the room. They have to wait for instructions. They have to wait for a rubric. They have to wait for a study guide. What I'm challenging you as an educator is to go make it happen. Quit waiting. It's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. And obviously, not taking that to the super extreme where you lose your job, but the idea that if we want the culture to change, we have to be the change agents ourselves. And when we do that, we open up the opportunities for kids. And so a couple of examples here that I just wanted to highlight quickly, and I've got a ton more on the resource guide. I'll make sure I pull it back up because there's like a 70-page document in there. This is a math one. So you want to talk about a STEM champion, because I know some of you are probably thinking, this is all great, but how do I make it work in my room? Here's an 8th grade algebra project. We used the Desmos app to create art. We used formulas and equations. This is actually my wife who works at a different school. And the kids created these elaborate pictures. And then we cut them out with the vinyl cutter. And we had these beautiful displays. And then she took it a step further and brought the parents in for a parent day. And they tried to teach their parents how to create art on the Desmos app. And if you want to talk about an eye-opening experience, eye-opening for the parents to see, like, holy cow, this is amazing what my kids are doing, and for the kids to realize how hard it is to teach because there's a lot of frustration, but in a good way. And so it's a great reminder of what teachers do every single day for kids. Here's another math one, because I always think math are the toughest subjects to weave in projects and STEM and so forth. Once again, 8th grade, we were building miniature golf courses, and we built 19 different holes, and they had to take stuff. We went and studied a miniature golf course. We took calculations and dimensions and elevation and pitch and studied what it worked. And then they had to sketch it out online and then bring it to life. Here's 5th graders. I stopped down in an elementary classroom, and we learned circuits and electronics, and we made interactive postcards where they drew a postcard, and then we had an LED light, and we used copper tape and a watch battery to bring it to life. And it was just a really amazing thing. And I didn't start off and say, this is how we do, this is what electricity looks like, and this is a circuit. We just started making, and their curiosity led to those conversations. And so we need to have the guts and the heart and the passion to make. And for me, the heart and the passion for me is to get more kids involved. More girls where it seems to be taboo to want to do these things. Bring in more diversity. Bring in more people working together that never thought about working before, and help making that happen. The ingredients is you have to have an idea. It helps to have people to work with you. I always say, people always talk about the DIY, the do-it-yourself environment. Where I'm at is a DIT, do it together. We can't do it alone. We need help. We need support, and we need to bounce ideas off one another. It's important to have a place to work. And if you have a classroom where this can happen, that's phenomenal. But you might have to carve out a space, no matter how small or dinky. You have to start somewhere, and it'll naturally build. You need materials, so ask for donations. Help make it happen. There's grants that you can write. I'm getting ready to post out a blog post here, not to self-hype myself, but in a couple of days on all the different grants that people can apply for STEM money. Materials can be donations. I've seen some amazing things where each teacher, when they put out their supply list, ask for a donation of a different material. So in kindergarten, it might be this teacher asked for cotton balls, and this one here asked for cardboard. And then in this grade, they're asking for, stuff from the dollar store, and this teacher's asked for duct tape. And you just kind of blend it all together for everyone to use. What would our world look like if more people started projects, made a ruckus, and took risk? I love Seth Godin. He's not an educator, and he's talking about business, but doesn't this apply so much to education? What if we just started doing? And that's what I like about it with makerspace and STEM education and project-based learning. We can knock out so many acronyms and initiatives by just doing what we know works. And it's creating engaging projects that's hands-on, where kids can explore and come up with their own answer. And so we need to keep moving forward with this. We need to empower teachers. We need to put them in the experiences. We need to connect with experts from around the world. And we need to be creative. Go around, see what other spaces are doing. Go to the art gallery. Go to these different places and figure out what's going on. Where can we go? Where can we find out what's happening and infuse that into our own classrooms? And so to close, it's a quick 8-step progression. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, and I'm sure there's probably questions, but here's the progression for you and for your school and even for students. We start with wonder. I wonder what happens if I. What if you do something? What is it that you're going to do? And it may or may not work, and that's okay. Where is the talent? What works in other places? Have you talked to the industry people, the businesses that are involved in STEM? Have you talked with the art gallery? Have you talked with the home improvement stores? Go find out what works. Your local universities and colleges. And connect. Everyone is lonely. I don't mean that in a sad way, but people have time and energy to spend on things that matter. We always say we're so busy, we don't have enough time, and really what we're saying is all these things on my to-do list aren't important. They're not important to you, but things that matter, we always find time. So how do we develop that where kids are invested in doing the work, and teachers and schools? That's where we want to go. In getting ourselves and others to understand why things succeed. Why do people do what they do? And how can we understand the mechanics that we want for the change to happen? So we're getting ready for an exhibition, and this is where an idea starts. We started sketching out, we want an interactive display where parents can push a button and it leads to a podcast of their voice explaining the artwork that they did on this big mural that we're trying to build. And kids and I are working on this, and it's hard, and we haven't yet to figure it out, but we're getting pretty close. The most important and probably the most challenging is to take that leap. You need to jump in. There isn't a bridge. There's not a step-by-step approach. What works in my school, there's things that you can maybe apply, but your school is going to be different than mine, and you know that. You have to jump in to make it possible. And challenge the status quo. Challenge the people you work with. Challenge what we think is possible. This is what we try to tell kids all the time, and I always come back and say, but are we living this, or are we just paying lip service to it? If you're going to believe in something and you think it's going to work and you do it, okay, people can't stop it. People can't stop momentum. People can't stop kids being excited about learning. I've never seen it happen. Doesn't mean that it maybe hasn't happened. But when I got kids fired up, pumped up, coming in early, staying late to make and create and do, I know that we're on to something. And it's not because of me, it's because of the culture that's starting to build. And then we need to transform the world around you. Make the change happen. Create good in the world. Talk to people. Find out what are the problems in the community. Pull the businesses. There's real world problems. There's nothing better than when a kid's idea is actually used by someone in the community. And to make sure that we contribute. Because what I have found over my years, and I'm far from perfect and I'm far from great, but once you start leading, you start to find other leaders all around you. And when that happens, your network grows. Everybody benefits. Everyone becomes more powerful. And the more you share, the more you receive. And I always believe in sharing, sharing, sharing. I give everything I have, whether good or bad, in the hopes that it inspires kids and other people to try. Because when we do, we gain ownership of the learning. We gain power of ourselves, and we gain power to make things happen. And when we make, I won't show this video, but I'll have the link to the presentation, there is a risk of failure. And things do break, and things will fail. And most ideas don't work. But what I always tell teachers is this: if you try something that doesn't work, the kids will be okay. They'll survive. It's not the end of the world that we sometimes stress out thinking that we can't afford to have that happen. And in this video, if you get a chance to go back and watch, my daughter is trying to give an explanation of a robot, and it completely breaks and falls apart right in the middle of it. And she has to adapt. And it's a really great learning moment that I like to show a lot of people. And so I want to close with this. An ounce of action is worth a ton of theory. It's my favorite quote of all time. So I can talk about this all I want. You can read books, and you can go on social media and find tweets and Facebook posts and read all these things. None of it matters unless you do something about it. So many people read and gather and take notes and go to conferences, and they go back and they get back to the grind of the job, and the job is so demanding that those notes and ideas just sit on a shelf. We've got to bring those to life. So what are you going to do? What are you going to bring to the world? I want you to start. That's my challenge to you, those of you listening live, and later those that listen to the recording, is to start. I want you to embody these features, to be curious and playful, be a risk taker, change your perspective, stay persistent, and start to share. And so these questions of do you want to be a STEM champion come from the book STEAM Maker, which is a highly recommended read. But in there, who doesn't want their students to be able to think critically and analyze these topics and research and direct their own learning and work successfully on a team and possess oral and written communication skills and work independently and be able to explain their learning and apply the learning to the real world and to serving leadership roles? There's not a single classroom that doesn't try to do this every single day. That's what it means to be a STEM champion. And so I know there's probably some questions. I haven't had a chance to see that part yet. So let's take some questions. I know we have some time. And then I'm going to challenge you to one final thing here before we bounce out. So Pamela, I don't know if you can jump back on.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that wonderful and very inspirational content with us. We have received several questions, and so let's go ahead and tackle those now. Just a reminder to all of our audience members, you can still type questions into the chat box in the GoToWebinar control panel. So Aaron, let's start with the first question. As a teacher, you want to change, but it's not always up to us to decide how to teach. How can you help very structured administrators to understand and change? Or in essence, what's the best way to get administrators, fellow teachers, and parents behind your STEM or makerspace ideas?
That's a great question. A couple of things, because as much as we know that this is the way to go and this is what we're passionate about, I understand not taking it to the level where your job is at risk. So a couple of things of what we have done. One is you could start to offer after school things. And so I run what's called a Young Engineers of Today program. And my whole goal with that was to provide a STEM learning opportunity that schools weren't providing. And through there, I always told parents in the information meeting, my goal is to unemploy myself from this. They had to pay for it because at the time that's how we operated our online costs, and the kids got to keep all the materials and everything like that. But I always told them I want this to spread and become so popular that schools go, this needs to be curriculum. And it's been a couple year process. It's been up and down, but we're to a point now where the schools want to embrace it. And so you can start with something like that. You can start with the after schools clubs because the minute kids get excited for learning, parents want to know more. And that's when you build the relationship with parents and schools. And it's at that point that parents will be your advocate for more and more and more. Um, so there's one way. We've done things where we've offered like parent-kid workshops on the weekend, and we've tried to just help the parents understand that it's more than just playing. We used to run, we don't do it anymore, but when we first started this, we ran what was called Teacher Tinker Time on Fridays. And on Fridays, every single prep period, we had a making activity. And we invited administrators in. And we invited teachers in to come do this small little simple activity. And we would show them how it could align with learning targets and the 21st century skills. So we always challenge them to come in to experience it, because when you talk about it, it just sounds like it's a free-for-all. And people don't understand it until they embody it. The other thing is, if that's not something that's workable within your lesson plan, all the teachers I work with is as if there's structure and format, things that you have to get done. There's ways in which you can take that lesson plan and open it up to create small moments of this and start to slowly build the culture. It's small little steps. It's not the best answer, but it's better than nothing. And so I'll make sure my email is shared if there's a lesson or people are thinking, whoever posed the question of a lesson of how they want to make that happen. I would love to brainstorm, not that I have the answer, to show how to do that. And I think it's just a slow curve. But the key is we got to get kids involved and parents involved. And in our area, parents are the strongest voice. And if they're in support of something, it's really hard for schools to say no to that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Another question we've received is, how do you find people to collaborate with your students? You talked a lot about businesses and industry, but how do you bring those people in and get them excited to come into your classroom and work with your students?
Another fantastic question. Depends on our thing. So like when we were working, I referenced the kids working with the founder of Dexter. It was their GPS shield that we were working on, and it wasn't working. And so we just simply went to the website and found an email and just emailed. It's amazing how many people will say yes to kids. And so many times people are afraid to ask, or they'll say, I don't know who to ask. Well, what do you need? Well, I need this. Did you call the company and ask for the person? Well, no. So that's where I would start. On social media, if you're a Twitter user, there's really good hashtags, MakerEd, STEMEd, makerspace. Just looking up the people and just reaching out, whether it's through Twitter or Facebook or email. And we just had great success with that, especially when it comes from the students. And so for us, we work with the kids on how do we craft a quality email where it's not just like, hey, can you talk to me about this? But how do we write it professional? How do we come across that we have a concern, and how do we sell the idea? There's another key piece that comes out of being this STEM champion is this communication. And it works really, really well. And so a lot of times if people don't know who to reach, it's because they don't really know what the problem is that they need help with. There's simple things like Microsoft, I know, has a Skype group, and you can search by country and by profession and by expert, and sometimes there's people in there that you can find. And so we have found some people that actually we're Skyping with some people that they're getting ready to climb Mount Everest, and we're taking a look at the technology that gets in the getting them to scale to the peaks. And so they're kind of all over, but identifying what that is, and just simply reaching out. And like I always tell people, the worst they're going to do is ignore you, say no, and you're right where you were. And so we'll reach out to 5 or 6 people, and you only need really one to respond.
Great, thank you. We've received a couple questions about standards, so I've kind of combined them into one. But how do you cover Common Core standards in your STEM classroom, or how do you mesh the curriculum with state standards and end of the year state exams?
Um, really good. So I'm going to switch over. Um, see if I can type in here real quick. I have in here, so we are a project-based learning school, and hopefully this will load up. And so what we do is we infuse a lot of our STEM and our makerspace into our core classes. Like my makerspace, I don't actually have like a class. Like kids can't just pop in. There's no time in the day for it whatsoever. So our makerspace is primarily used mostly. The most people that use it is language arts. We've built tiny homes. We've built podcasts. We've done just all sorts of things. But in this resource guide that I've linked in this maker handbook, I have put in here a whole entire process of how we build a project, how we align it to standards, how we get to the end product. And let's see if I can pull it up here really quick here. So if you get down here to part 3 in this, and I'll be glad to go in more detail with anybody that has questions. We talk about this PBL and Maker worlds collide, and you can put Maker for STEM. But we start with the question, and we have all sorts of documents that are in here. And you can see how we do a project tuning process where a teacher will have an idea and they pitch it to other teachers and students to get feedback. Does the driving question and the product actually align? What things do we need? How do we build that student voice? And you can watch those videos in there. I have all our forms that we do right in here. The project-based learning is more than projects. How we build it out from start to finish to our exhibition. I mean, we're a school of 1,100 kids, and every single kid has an exhibition night. We do it by grade level, and they have to showcase all their learning. So it can be done. It's not easy. The biggest shift for teachers is the amount of work on the front-loading end. So often the way we've built lessons and our class is we're busy every single day. That you feel like you never get a break. When you develop these projects with the STEM and the making and everything, it's a ton of upfront work. So we always tell people you have to do the project first as a teacher, and that'll let you know where the pitfalls and glitches are. So like right now, we have a language arts project, and we're studying symbols and metaphors and how the tools and technology from World War I are still being used in today's society, how they've shifted and changed. And we're creating Christmas trees, and the kids are 3D printing all these ornaments, and they're building them from scratch using CAD software. And so they have to figure out, say you're using like the assembly line for Henry Ford with cars, they're trying to build the idea on their paper, arguing that to make a Barbie doll basically couldn't happen without Henry Ford with the assembly line thing. And now they're building these symbols and projects. And so it's a good way of weaving it all together. But I have a ton of documents, and there are forms or guides, everything we do, because we have the same thing. We've got priority standards. We're Iowa Common Core. We've got common formatives. We're PLCs. We have it all, and it's not easy. I'll be completely honest. It's not, but it's possible, and it's doable. And when it works, it's really, really profound.
Thank you. We have a question regarding students' perspective on STEM education, and that is, how do you transition your students from being highly focused on the outcome to accept that the process is more important and that failure is okay?
Oh, that's tough. At middle school, there's still a little bit of hope, and that's where I'm at, where they haven't been cemented. I know, like at our high school, sometimes it's almost too late because they've already been in the game of education that long, and so building that early on. I know up front with projects and making in STEM, the kids that struggle the most for us are what I would say the quote-unquote high flyers. Those that know how to play the game of education to get A's without doing much work because they know the system, they know the loopholes. And now with this open-endedness, there is not the option to find a loophole. There's no cheat code. And so those are the ones that struggle the most. But it's good because at the end of the day, I also know that they really care and they find ways. But they complain, they struggle, their parents struggle because all of a sudden now the kids are stressed maybe for the first time, and just trying to show them that this is what they need to be developing and learning, which is not always the answer that they want to hear. It's the kids that are typically not motivated that really come to life in these projects. We're doing one right now where in language arts where students they travel to a senior home and they interview the elderly and they learn about their life story and all the things that go on, and they build this beautiful paper about them, and then they create a gift. And so now we've been making all sorts of gifts of, you name it, we have it, that represent the person in their life. And we've been delivering those to the people this week. And so they come in, they get to read their paper, and then they don't realize that these kids are going to give them this present based on what they've learned. Um, and it's so powerful. You know, at first the kids don't quite see it, and then when the person that they've been talking to and learning so much about break into tears, they have something. There's something powerful there that, a standard can't describe. We've covered the standards, we have the writing and the literacy and the reading and the writing and all that jazz. But the kids will come and go with those. It's that moment right there when a person breaks in tears or gives them a hug or has a smile that goes on for days that goes beyond all the headache of getting to that point. And so it's just building through that and showcasing. So even if you can find careers, if you can find parents that are in this field and bring them in to be speakers to talk about their job and how many times they fail and have to revise and go through stuff, it's amazing how many parents will come in. And so just trying to find all these ways to build this kind of career vision to show that this is okay. Because society and social media and everything we do that doesn't focus on that. They focus on the end perfect piece, the overnight sensation, and we have to kind of work to build that down. And it's not easy, and you can't get through every kid. But we model it, we bring in other people that model it, and keep working through it. We can start to make that happen.
Great. And thank you again, Aaron, for taking time to answer all these questions. We're pushing right up against 6 o'clock, and I want to be respectful of everyone's schedule. And so we're probably going to wrap up for today. And so on behalf of Pittsco Education and the Coder Z team at Intelitech, I would like to personally thank Aaron for the great content he shared and thank all of our participants for their attentiveness. We received a lot of questions throughout, and so it's very obvious that the audience was engaged. And so we'll try and answer some of those questions in the resources that we post along with this recording. Again, we appreciate you being here. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much for having me. And anybody that wants to reach out, here's my information. If I didn't get your question answered, reach out. I'm glad to connect with you and help in any way I can. It's what I love to do. I don't have all the answers, but definitely will bash my brain along with yours and do what I can to help you. So thank you so much for your time and for attending today.
Thank you, Aaron.